My name is Andrew and this is Rogue Wrenching. Today we're going to be covering what to do when you get hit with an unexpected, very high automotive repair bill. As a professional automotive technician, I see large, expensive repair bills almost every day. However, for most people, this isn't the sort of thing they've encountered every day, and they may not have ever encountered this before. So what I'm going to attempt to do today is to give you guys some advice and some knowledge from an industry professional to give you the best set of information you have to make the best decision. So it might ramble a little bit, and I apologize for that, but I want you guys to be equipped to make the right decision when it comes to repairing your vehicle, especially when it's an expensive repair. The first and most important thing really is to have good trust in the technician or the mechanic or the shop that's working on your vehicle. If there is any question about whether or not your vehicle needs this repair, go and get a second opinion, because chances are that repair costs a whole lot more than what a second opinion would cost you. And if you take it for a second opinion at another reputable shop and you get the same answer, chances are your car probably needs that repair. So now you've established whether or not your car actually needs the repair. We're going to assume, for the sake of argument here, that your car does need the repair. Now, the next question is it worth fixing the car? And to evaluate that, you have to look at a number of different factors. I actually had a car die on me last week, and it is what I would define as mechanically totaled, meaning that it costs more to repair than makes sense based on the value of the car. Now, you have to understand that value is not just what it's worth in the marketplace, but also what it's worth to you. For example, the car that I had that died, and I'm just going to use this as kind of a running example for the rest of this video, just because it's easy to do this because I don't have to make up numbers or imagine things. I can give you actual numbers and tell you why it made sense to not repair my vehicle. So the car that we had was a 2008 Mercury Mariner, which has been a great car for my family and I. We've had this car for about 2 years, well, not quite 2 years, a year and a half, and it's been really great, but it has a couple of key issues that we didn't like. The first is it doesn't have third row seats, and since I have 2 daughters, that means I don't have a single extra seat in my car when I've got the whole family in the car. So that's kind of we liked it, but it wasn't great in that respect. Second is because it's a 4-cylinder, it really does not like going up hills. We enjoy road tripping as a family, and so just as a whole, it worked, but it wasn't ideal. It wasn't something we were gonna keep long term just because of that. Also, it had a little bit higher mileage. It was at about 186,000 miles when it died. And so there were a bunch of factors that made it where that wasn't the car that we'd replace it with if we ended up replacing that vehicle. So that factors into it too. So if the car that you have does not work for what you need, or you're looking to upgrade anyway, then that needs to come into a factor, because it's not just replacement cost, or what the car is worth in the market, it's what the car is worth to you. So you got to factor that in when we're talking about this sort of thing. Figuring out what a car is worth to you and what it's worth in the market, you have to understand some cars have sentimental value to people, and you can't put a dollar value on that. And if the car matters a lot to you, if it was, your dad's car before he passed, something like that, dude, it's a sentimental decision. It's totally up to you. But what we're talking about here is kind of cars that we're not emotionally attached to. They're just a practical, get you from point A to point B type of vehicle. Once you know what your car is worth and what it's going to cost to repair, you need to weigh replacement cost of the vehicle versus cost of the repair. And then also, while you're weighing those things, you need to evaluate if this is a common problem for these vehicles, meaning if you replace it with a used car, that is comparable to what you have, is it going to have this exact same issue in 6 months? Because then you're not really going to be ahead at all. So for example, my car, the 2008 Mariner, has a known issue where the transmission control module fails, which applies 2 different gear clutches at the same time while you're driving, which leads to a sudden onset transmission failure. So it'll be driving just fine, and well, what happened was my wife went through a car wash, stopped at the front to pay for the car wash, went to roll into the car wash, and it had no go, and the car had to be pushed. So rapid onset transmission failure is a common problem with those cars, and it's caused by a transmission control module, which means you need to replace the TCM and the transmission for a combined repair cost. At my cost, just the parts was almost $4,000. To replace the vehicle would cost probably closer to $5,000 to replace that particular car. However, if you bought a used car, it still has the same issue. So you could end up needing a transmission and a TCM in 6 months, and then we're not any money ahead. So that's where, that kind of makes us lean towards, hey, maybe we should repair this instead of replacing it. That makes it so it might make more sense to repair instead of replacing. Now, for us, we looked at, this isn't the car that we want to have long term. We were planning to replace this car in about 6 months anyway. So at the point that we decided this car is not worth fixing to us because we want to replace it, we put its value at about $3,000 in good running condition to, as far as its value to us, what we would be willing to pay for it. And the repair cost substantially outweighed that by about 25%. Again, like I said, just the cost of the parts was about $4,000, and that's with me doing all the labor myself. So it did not make sense for us to repair the car we had. So we decided to simply replace it. We moved up our replacement schedule by about 6 months and acquired a new vehicle, which I'm going to talk about in a later video. Drop a subscribe if you haven't already. We ended up replacing that vehicle instead of repairing it. An additional factor to consider is how long you've owned the car and how much maintenance and repair you've put into the car up to this point. For example, I bought a car a couple years ago that a customer brought into the shop I worked for, and it had a repair, and he said, I don't want to fix it, I'm done, I've put too much money into this car, I'm just going to go buy another one. And I bought that car for really, really cheap. That car only needed about $200 worth of repair work to get it back on the road. But if you look back at history, the gentleman that owned this vehicle had put thousands of dollars into this car. It had new head gaskets, it had an all new AC system, it had a new radiator. I mean, this thing had a ton of work done to it to make it a really reliable vehicle. So with that, he was just fed up with fixing it and he could afford to replace it, so he just went ahead and replaced it. But in that case, I would say it's certainly not worth repairing, even if the vehicle's only worth the cost of the repair. Because you've done all this other work to it, it's in better shape than what you could buy a comparable vehicle for. So it's not just what the car is worth and what it's worth to you, but also how much, maintenance you have done to that vehicle. Because when you repair a vehicle, you know what you've got, you know what's been done to it. There's no question about, well, was the oil changed on time, or was the transmission serviced regular? Did it get a good air filter every time? Things like that. There's no question because if you've had it for a while. So if you just bought a car 6 months ago and it has a catastrophic failure, I would say generally speaking, just replace it if it's not cost prohibitive to do so. So if you bought a $3,000 car and say the transmission went out and it cost $2,500 to fix and you didn't really care for the car, just cut your losses, get something else, get something better. So there is definitely a time and a place to cut your losses and just get out of the car and get something different. Now, as a huge Dave Ramsey fan, which I'm going to talk more about kind of finances and finances for automotive technicians and just finances in general coming up in the near future on the channel, but just full disclosure, I'm a Dave Ramsey fan. So that being said, I don't think that it's ever a good idea to finance a new car. So you have to look at whether or not you have the cash on hand to replace the vehicle. And that's going to factor into whether or not you can or can't, replace said vehicle. I don't think you should finance anything. So if you can't afford the repair and you can't afford a replacement vehicle, that puts you in a hard spot, which usually means you got to buy a crummier or crappier car, which is not ideal. But I don't think it's worth going to debt over a vehicle for, especially not something like a vehicle that's a depreciating asset. Too many times I've seen people feel like they're stuck in their car or they can't get into a better car and spend $5,000 in repair work on a car that even when repaired is only worth maybe $2,000. And it's not because it's a special car, it's because they don't know there are other options out there. Car shopping can be intimidating and I really don't like it. So I get not wanting to do it, but at the same time, you've got to make the decision that's best for you and your situation. Sometimes that means replacing cars. You've got to do what's best for you and your situation. Every situation is different. There's not really a perfect formula that I can give you. But if I was to kind of summarize this video and give you the formula, it would be, first of all, verify that the estimate for your repair is actually good and that's actually what it costs to fix your car and that your car actually needs that repair. Because if you get quoted a transmission and you need a relay, you need a second opinion to tell you that's a relay and you'll save thousands of dollars. Verify the repair and the estimate is good. Evaluate what the car's value is to you. And if your value to you is here and the repair is up here, it's not worth putting this much money into this much car. You see what I'm saying? So if the repair estimate is way more than the car is worth, generally speaking, it's not worth fixing unless you really like the car and you plan on keeping that car for a long time. By doing that repair, the car becomes a good, reliable vehicle. So once you've established where your values are as far as cost of repair versus value of the car, so if it's a $10,000 car and the repair is $5,000, but then you've got a car that's worth $10,000 and it's in really good running condition and you already own the car, that's great, go ahead and do the repair. Now, when you run into things like you've got a car that's worth $3,000 and it needs $5,000 worth of work, doesn't make sense to do it. So you just got to evaluate that cost of repair versus value of vehicle. So when you get hit with a big estimate like that that's got a bunch of little things, the other thing you can do if you decide that it's worth keeping your car is you can prioritize and kind of triage those repair items. So for example, if you've got a coolant leak, your brakes are squeaking, and your windows don't roll down, you're going to prioritize the brakes, the coolant leak, over the windows not rolling down, because the windows not rolling down doesn't affect the safety or the safe operation of your vehicle. So when it's a big repair and it's one big item, you're really looking at either replace it or repair it. There's not really any middle ground. If it's a bunch of small items, you can break them down and prioritize and kind of spread that cost out over time. Okay guys, to wrap this up and kind of summarize what we've been talking about is you need to evaluate the cost of the repair, make sure it's a good estimate, know about what it's worth. So if you got an estimate for, say, an engine replacement, call around to a couple of reasonable shops and get pricing on that. You're gonna see pricing can vary by up to a few $1,000s on a large job like that. So get a good estimate, figure out what the hard number is, what is it actually gonna cost to get your vehicle fixed, and then once you have that, evaluate and measure that against what the vehicle's worth and what it's worth to you. So like I said, in our situation, we didn't want this car, we wanted a bigger car with a third row. So that reduced the value that it was worth to us. So we decided, based on the high repair cost and the relatively low value of the car, that it didn't make sense to put that much money into that little of a car. So we went ahead and just said, nope, we're done, and ended up replacing it with a new one. Okay guys, that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. Drop a subscribe if you haven't already. Smash that like button if you like this video, and we'll see you guys very, very soon.